Hi, friends and family,
Welcome to Hope After Addiction
with your host, Katie Comer.
and Chelsea McLeod.
Hi, welcome back to Hope After Addiction. Thank you so much for joining us today. Last week, if you listened, we had Barb Anderson on the podcast sharing her journey from the perspective of a mom who's walked with her son going through addiction. And it was super powerful. We bawled like a baby. It was very, very good. So if you haven't listened to that, if you're a mama, especially, go back and listen to that episode. It's very good. Today, we have Ron Anderson, her husband, who's going to offer the perspective of the dad in this journey. But also, Ron serves on the executive team at S2L, and he has seen hundreds of parents walk through this journey of addiction, their loved one dropping their babies off. And so he offers that unique experience being with S2L. And so we thank you so much for joining us here today. So I'm going to kind of give you the floor as you if you go back and listen to Barb's story, he's going to kind of fill in some of those gaps from the dad perspective, and then just any advice that he would give parents listening to this podcast.
Awesome.
So,
Katie, thanks for having me here.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to get here for a bit.
Yeah.
We've been kind of a little bit busy, but we love our guys as we serve at S2L, Spring to Life. We always say it's not a job for us, it's a calling. And we love what we do, and we love our guys. God gives us that Christ-like love for these men. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and I'm honored to serve here. As most of the guys know, a lot of guys know our story. By the time they get out of the program, they hear it. Often Barb will come up and used to regularly come up and give testimony to the mom's perspective, which is beautiful. I've had a lot of guys that were
really pretty,
really taken back by, one guy was like, I never considered what my mom dealt with or what she was going through. And when your wife came, it really gave me a look into what I was doing to mom. On a different level. So it was a beautiful thing. And actually, I was here snooping in when Barb was here, and I'm I like get over in the corner and I'm crying, like you say.
I know.
I'm crying like a baby.
It was
of course, we lived it. It was intense. It was a lot of years there, and no matter where you are in this journey, and no matter how you brought your children up, the enemy will always tell you that you failed somewhere. Okay, and quite possibly you did. Maybe you didn't do things. Nobody does everything exactly right in anything we do. But parenting is such an ebb and flow of things that nobody just gets it right every day. It's not going to happen.
Right.
A decision that we made that was a tough one, that we actually put our boys out of our house, and I'll tell you how that came about. That's a big move to make, and I've always been kind of hardcore. My dad was tough on me. I noticed some things with his toughness that I needed to not be so tough, but yet I came up that way. And Barbara's military family and has good discipline in her life as well. So we came together with a disciplined front. And probably if I could go back and do it again, I would look at and you question yourself all the time. I don't care how you did it. And we felt like we did it pretty close to, we whipped our children. I mean, we spanked our children on the behind.
Yeah, right.
Felt like when they did it, and then we felt like that wouldn't work. And I took him fishing one time, just
Bonding.
to break it up.
Yeah.
And, I did a lot of different things. And Barb and I were both present with our guys. Barb could have went and did anything work-wise, but she chose to, she loved fashion and loved, cutting hair and all makeup, all whatever that stuff's called. But she,
Whatever the makeup's called.
she loved to make people feel better
Right.
and about
She's great
themselves
at
and
that.
everything. But she wanted to be a mom, and in doing so, she had to put her shop in the house. And so that's a decision she made to be a mom. That's how stout that was. And so the decision to tell our boys to leave, there was a situation where my son had bought some big weight of marijuana. I guess I'm getting tongue-tied with this. And he was actually on a church retreat, and the police came over, and they had heard through informants that he had gotten a bunch of marijuana for resale. And our house was full of policemen.
Wow.
There was about 10 or
Terrifying.
12 cops around my house.
Wow.
And I'm the preacher. You know, I've always worked a job and pastored and ministered, mostly, not always, but at that time I was.
Wasn't a great look.
It wasn't a great look, and there was some concern. Although my wife she's pretty mean and she can handle her. Maybe I shouldn't say that. You could edit that out. But she can handle herself.
She can handle herself.
But as a father, as a husband, I thought, you know, my boys are putting my family, my wife, in jeopardy.
Wow.
And the danger that could be around that, drug dealers and things like that. And so, you know, maybe there's some ignorance there as well. But I just told them, you know, you got to go. If you're going to do that, put your mom in danger and put our house and reputation there. If you want to go do that, go do that.
Yeah.
And so that was a tough day to do that. But that was the beginning of our tough love, and the beginning of we didn't always come together on that tough love. I mean, there were times that, you know, we didn't see eye to eye. Now, Barb had that toughness. You know, she talked about that as far as that line drawn.
Sure. You have to.
But you'll always come into, everybody don't get to, the parents, the mom and dad, they never, you know, you usually don't get at the same place at the same time. So there can be a lot of storming. It's really challenging on the relationship between
I can't imagine,
husband and wife. And for us to have come through that, we've been married 41 years now, and the crowd goes crazy. They used to clap, and you know, we've been married 30 years, 35, and the church are clapping. I'm like, stop that. Why do people do that? I know why they do that.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big deal to stay together.
Yeah.
And to go through so many decisions to be made with your son, because the nurturing side of Barb and women is really strong.
Yeah.
And Dad's saying, I need to come in here and be heavy. And Mom, you know, to get that pulled together is an interesting thing. But Barb was talking about, she alluded to the church service, and she was sitting back there in a good place and spiritual and praying. I'm sitting up front, and she said, and you know, they began to pray, and as they prayed, we'd go up to the altar. A lot of people would get up there, so Barb could get to me without being noticed. And she you know, told me what she saw, that kind of thing. And I just turned to her and I said, well, we know what the Lord told us. And I'm not supposed to do this. I don't do this. And so we had to hold to that. You know what the Lord told us, that I'm going to bring them back. This is how I'm going to bring them back. And he gave me that vision, if you will. And I know some people don't, you know, whatever they think about that. You showed up too late to tell me different, because I saw it. You know, I go back out in history.
Yeah, you
so
lived
come on now, you can't argue with it too much. But yeah, and so like she said, 2 or 3 hours later, we went home and surprised that it was on our answer machine, the Rutherford County Police, as she said, and you know, he's down here. We're doing a check to see back at the home he came from, his address on file. You know, we want to make sure that there's nothing domestic going on. So anyway, we did go through that whole thing there, and a scary thing. And like Barb was saying, he came home, and I was at work, as she said, and the way he came home, I just knew, and I think she did too, that we're not there. This is not what God showed us. It's a feel. It's really, man, when you hunker down, because our kids, my kids mean everything to me, man. Yeah. My boys. And I've always said I'd give everything away for them. And it's the truth. But I knew it's not about what you give them. It's not about, you see, the pulling back and giving them that tough love is the hardest thing to do. It's harder than giving them the money. It's harder than making a way for them when they're, you know, it's hard to draw that line and see them walk. We saw Patrick walk out of our house. He would come back and we'd take him and we'd set rules, and you got to do that. You got to set rules. And then he'd pack up, and we saw him leave our house on one of the coldest days of the winter with just a backpack on his back.
It's terrifying.
His desire to use and, you know, to act a fool had overcome him, and he had to leave. But he knew that if we set and establish rules in our house, that's what they're going to be. I don't move them. I don't move that today. Most guys
sure.
that know me know how stern I can be in those things, and I just believe that's how God wants us to father our children. Now, there are times that probably a big old hug is in order, sure.
Yeah.
And those are times that if I could go back, because what's going to happen with a lot of parents that's listening and going through this, I assume you're going through this to be listening, is that you're really going to evaluate what you did and didn't do.
Yeah.
And the enemy will accuse you
Yeah.
constantly of what you did and didn't do. And some of you really messed up. You really did. I mean, you just blew it. You tried to be a friend to your son or your daughter. You just tried to be a friend to them and give them everything and thought everything was going to be fine if I just hang out with them, be friends, and let them do whatever. And God needs us to be parents. He needs us to be the authority in their lives.
That is our role.
Yeah, that's our role. Can we be a friend to them? Absolutely. It's cool that you can do things with them, but there has to be a drawn line to let them know that, I love you enough, and God has given me this role as a parent, and I've got to make these tough decisions.
Yeah.
But let's just say, okay, we believe the accusations that we blew it. We just didn't do it right. We weren't taught ourselves. Maybe you weren't taught yourself. Grew up in a single parent's home. You didn't see the balance of a father and a mother and how to do it and that kind of thing. And you blew it. You just blew it. Well, and your son's in treatment or he needs treatment, that kind of thing. While he's away, first of all, the first night in treatment will be the best sleep you'll ever have.
That's right. Even as a
wife, I can
knew
imagine.
that.
But
It's
when
true.
they're in treatment, it is so sweet. Barb, as she said, she would stay up all night, and that's the kind of stuff. And I would just go to bed. I mean, I had to work. She did too, but she would stay around and see what's going on. But let's just say you could just admit that you blew it, and that's the first place of getting healed in anything we do. That when we admit our fault or our challenge. And after you've given that to God and say, I admit I've messed up, God, what do I do now? God, the Father, loves when you hard stop and say, I messed up, Father. What do you want me to do now? How would you genuinely, my son came back kind of like that, and how would you think we feel, or you kind of go through that when your son would stop something and look at you and say, Daddy, I'm sorry. What do I do now? What are you going to do with that?
True repentance. Yeah.
Yeah. What are you going to do? You're going to forgive.
Yeah.
You're going to come here, son.
That's right.
It's done here. We're on our way to healing. But so let's get right there where that you pray that prayer, God forgive me, what do I do next? And then take the forgiveness that Father God will give you.
Yeah. That's another step.
Yeah.
It's taking the forgiveness.
Yep. Well, it's something, Katie, that I tell. I know you're obviously heavily involved with having a fool with Adam, right?
Fool with him.
Yeah,
As I do.
yeah. As our CEO
Yeah.
and dealing with Adam, that there's a lot of guys that just hang on to stuff like that. But yeah, kind of lost my train. Oh, so you get that place of forgiveness.
Yeah.
And I tell the guys all the time, and that's what I was saying with Adam. He sees it too, that once you come to treatment in the program, these men come and they ask God to forgive them. Then you accept that forgiveness and you walk it out. You just keep walking it out, because you're gonna continually get bombarded with things you didn't do, the shame of what you did, the carnage is back at home.
Yeah,
you're in a good place, and all of a sudden you take a phone call from home, and you hear about all the terrible things that you've left back there. You still got to walk in that God has forgiven me, and I've got to forgive myself. I tell the guys all the time, I said, how dare you not forgive yourself, and God has forgiven you. Who do you think you are that you won't go ahead and forgive yourself? You got to. You got to walk in that place to get in the real power band with God. So Patrick came back, and as Barb said, there was a lot of ebb and flow. He came to spring to life, but we had some crazy stuff that happened. She started going into that a little bit, and we're probably short on time. But with him, he got free. He started working in the church. He got married a beautiful nurse. At the time, and so he got a great job with a computer company in Nashville, big computer company in Nashville. He was top in sales in there, just blowing. I mean, just things were happening. He was making good money. Bought his first house. Was in the process of buying his first house. We thought all the other stuff was left behind.
Sure.
But what was happening? What happened was this. And it's a lesson for the guys in the program or guys anywhere that I say Christianity is like flying a plane. You stop, you drop. You got to keep flying. You got to keep going. And so what happened was Pat was working with the youth minister there as an assistant, he and his wife, and at the time. And so when he began to have some success at work and he began to stay longer at work, he began to miss church. You know, he was working and working. Then he found there was a bunch of young guys at this particular place that he worked that all of them were, you know, early 20s, something like that. And they were making six figures. And that's a bad thing. Young people that, you know,
with that amount of money.
Yeah, that amount of money. And so this is what happened. He went to the lake. He went to the lake one day with all these guys. You know, all these guys, and there was some cocaine that was brought out there, and so somehow whatever situation was, he partook of that.
Yeah, he said yes to that. Yeah.
And so that happened, and we found out obviously that later because you know, there were some concerns in what was going on with him. I know the mom's intuition, Barb, felt some stuff and everything, and one day there was a knock at her door. And it was Patrick and his wife then. And Patrick had been fired from his job. Matter of fact, he'd been fired from his job for several months. And he was getting up and leaving the home and acting like he was going to work. Yeah. You know, and so they had just put a contract on a house and everything seemed to be going well. But he came in and told the story. And that's when, you know, here we go again, right? That kind of thing. Yeah. And so that's when, and the thing the message we try to get out to pastors is that happened to us, and he was older then, right? He was in his 20s, early 20s probably, and I didn't know where to send my son. I didn't know. I was a pastor. And where do you go with this? I mean, where do we send him? And so we were told of a place that was I call it white coats and stethoscopes. You know, and talk about endorphins. They taught us about addiction and things like that. We would go down every week.
Scientific part of it,
all that stuff, and very, nice and look very much like a hospital, right? Same kind of setting. 28 days, and so we did that, and I don't know that it lasted 28 days, and so then he left there, and then we, we found Spring to Life. And the program back then was just started by two guys that were pretty rough, to say the least, themselves, and got saved, radically saved, and had a friend of theirs pass away and due to drug addiction.
Yeah, that's how it started.
And they said, we could have done something about that. So that was the nucleus of this, and I've watched this thing all these years to see how that God's favor has been upon this ministry to help young men. Yeah. And so we're grateful and thankful. But let me just say this. I talked to a friend of mine that came through the program the first time I was here. It's a long story, but anyway.
Two separate times.
Yeah, two separate times. I left and came back. It was an interesting story. I will have to tell that on some other, how this happened, how Adam asked me to, several years later, have I ever thought about coming back? And I said, not only no, heck no. We're in real estate, things are going well and all that. And then 3 days later, the Spirit of the Lord said, well, wait a minute, Adam Comer. And I'm like, oh, gosh, no. So I came back reluctantly. But anyway, this young man that came through, and I talked to him, he's working for Teen Challenge now. And he went through Spring to Life, and obviously ended up at Teen Challenge at some point in time. And we were talking about it, and I was talking about my son. I said, we went to this place, and then we came to Spring to Life, and he kind of was bumping around a little bit, but he pulled it back together, and he made this comment, very simple thing, and he says, it just takes what it takes. I mean, it's pretty simple, but it hit me strong that some guys can go in our program. A lot of our guys have a Christian background, and they'll move into that, and they'll just rock on, and they're good, they're golden. And when I say that, they get what we talk about, the four pillars, when we talk about prayer, the Bible, fellowship, and one of those others that I've forgotten right now. But there's a 4-pillar deal. reading the Bible, I think it is. Yeah, reading the Bible. And
Reading
when
the
you
Word.
put those in place,
Yeah.
And all of us need to. This is not just somebody that's dealing with addiction. It's things that we need to put in our lives because life is hard enough, even if you don't have an addiction problem,
Yeah.
right? But when we compound our challenge and our sorrow with addiction and let that in, and so many kids and people are doing that nowadays, and parents having to deal with that. It's epidemic. We're losing them.
Sure.
We go to so many funerals, guys that we love, and it just it just breaks our heart to see that they lost the battle, And so I'm thankful today, as Barb said, Patrick came out of it. He his first marriage didn't make it. She didn't know what to do with addiction and was not interested in that, and so it be. And then he found another a lady that befriended, and they became friends, and then they dated, and she has some kids, and so it was a beautiful thing God put together. He loves kids, and so now they had some runs together. They had to work through something. Again, it takes what it takes.
Yeah,
we've been doing this addiction thing for a long time, man. Barb, and what you got to be careful is you don't become jaded with it and accept it as normal behavior, because some people have to live there. I got to put it over here and just let this thing. No. You stay active in faith, that what God shows you through that time. We often learn things through the hardest storms.
that's right.
And the thought process is, man, God, don't let me waste this storm. Let me learn something through this storm. And so we learned a lot about ourselves, about our children, about life. It's amazing what you learn through that. And when you learn that and you go through that journey, I think it's imperative that you help people with it.
Yeah.
You teach them. You should. I've been there. I've done that. It means a lot when when somebody's unelected, they can come up and tell you stuff and think about this or that. But when you've been there and you've done it, you've lived through it. You made a decision. I'm out of here. I'm divorcing this guy.
Yeah.
And then, but you walk with God through that. It was like, wait a minute, one more chance.
I know.
Right?
That's the one more chance.
One more chance.
Yeah.
And that one more chance. And it didn't just boom, all of a sudden happen overnight.
Yeah.
You still had a process to stay with what you felt God said to you. And I'm going to stay the course. And that's what you got to do with everything. If you're going to be anything for God in life, you got to hold to the principles of God no matter what's happening, no matter who leaves you, no matter who says this or that. You just know that God has said this, and you're going to go that way. So that's how we've had to walk this thing out. And I was Barb is still in real estate, and with that, she worked with Patrick just about 3 years ago. And he bought his first house.
That's so exciting.
He was in process for one, as I was saying before. They were actually going to close, and it imploded as his life did. Yeah. Right? His life imploded. Everything imploded. But so he got his credit together. So you know what that means. When you buy a house, I mean, that says a few things. You got your credit together, got your life together. And
you're making the right steps. Yeah.
Making the right steps. So,
and they often say what's dark will come into the light. So it sounds like for him, his life caught up to him in that moment, and it was brought to the light. So he had to deal with it. You had to deal with it with him, and so yeah. Well,
and the thing I have to say this about our children and about us, it may be in particular being Barb, we're pretty stubborn. She is anyway.
No.
Yeah, stubborn, But your kids are a product of you,
right?
And if there's stubbornness in there, you'll see that in them, okay?
Yeah.
And so don't be too alarmed when you see that apple fall not too far from the tree, right?
Yeah.
And then learn how to deal with it. But when you throw addiction inside of that, it's one of those things where that you got to understand some of the stubbornness. I know where that comes from. Yeah. And I still know that God will help my son.
Yeah.
So, you have to just stay at it, stay close to God. You got to lean on the Lord. Anything that you lean on, you got to be close to.
That's right.
And there's steps to get there in God. And I could tell you, we've lived it.
You lived it, and you've lived it. And the beautiful thing is you're living it out, at S2L with other parents constantly coming in and out.
Right.
and watching their sons, specifically sons, because it's an all-male facility, but you see it all the time with parents, dropping them off and making those decisions, those hard decisions, those tough decisions, tough love, and just saying.
Let me say this. Can I get in trouble? I'm going to get in trouble before I leave here. You ready?
Well, okay.
I'm going to say this. A lot of times, one of the consistent things we see, and let me put this nicely, because I talk straight to the guys at the program, really straight, is often, and there's a better way to say this, but there will be usually a weak daddy and a strong mama in the rearing of the son or the child, and what happens there, the strong affection of the mom will push the dad back where he's kind of weak, maybe not as strong, quiet, and the nurturing side is so strong that the forgiving and letting them get by with things, and the discipline side, not that mom can't, Barb could, I do remember.
She can hold her own.
She could hold her own, but I do remember the last time she tried to whip the boys. They were bigger than her, and all three of them started laughing. It was a bad scene. They just, okay, we're going to give up on this.
Yeah,
right?
We're past that.
Right, but the dad's usually the disciplinarian.
Sure.
And if you are a little softer in your approach, Dad, that's okay. You can come along, but Mom, kind of give him some room to come in and be the balance that they need to be. The nurturing side is something God gives ladies to do, and there could be a strong
reason
side
for
too.
it. Yeah.
But that cannot dominate the rearing of the child. And that's what the enemy has done in our world today. It's all these fatherless homes, whether they're in the home sleeping at night or they're absent. Sometimes they're just coming home and work is so heavy and things are going on, they don't really pay attention to the family. But a lot of our families now are being raised by grandmothers, and so that really brings the balance off with our families, and things can creep inside of that. But
you see it.
Yeah, we do see it.
You see a lot.
But there is hope and there's help. God's in the restoration business.
Yeah.
And thank God He is. I've needed forgiveness. I've stumbled and bumbled.
Absolutely.
In my life, I've made bad decisions as a dad, as a husband. Said things, all these things, but thank God there's a place that we can go. I heard this one time, a man told me one time to keep short accounts. Keep short accounts with God. In other words, when you sin, go to Him and say, Lord, just forgive me. That's a short account, because that is still on your record if you don't ask God, God, forgive me of that. Get that. I want that clean. I failed you. I did this or that. And He just does what He does. Yeah. But just keep short accounts inside of that. And raising children is a tough job. Yeah. It's a rewarding job. Like I said, I'd give everything away for my boys.
I know you would.
And but thank God I didn't have to. They're doing well. Both of them. My youngest son is doing well. Got a great job. Just got married about 3 months ago. We didn't think he was going to ever do that, but he did.
He did it.
And so he did
Good
it.
for him.
And he had a little rough time in his early teens as well. But he often tells us that I learned through watching. My older brother.
Sometimes that does happen.
This is not what I want to do. So, but I appreciate the opportunity to come today. Are we good?
We're good.
Right.
Ron, I do appreciate it. I know that this is not always easy to talk about. I told that to Barb. Just sharing your personal journey, where the enemy, even what you've walked through, can whisper in your ear, even just sitting here. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And you and Barb are both good enough, and your journey was hard, and you're telling about it. And there are people listening. There's dads listening to this podcast saying, I feel what he's feeling, where I would give anything for my sons, and to watch them just make bad decisions. It's just, it's heartbreaking. Yeah. So I thank you for your vulnerability. And I thank you for sharing your story. And I thank you for what you do with S2L and being Adam's partner in that. So I thank you for that.
He's a good partner.
He is a good partner.
He'll work. He'll work. Well,
he works
I don't
good.
have anything else.
Yeah.
He'll work. No.
He works good.
I love that guy.
I do too. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your story and you joining us today. So Thank you all for joining us. And we hope you join us next week for Hope After Addiction. Thank you.